I'm sure it has not escaped your notice that my various talks this now passing month were at least in part in the nature of preparations for the address that I have been asked to deliver at the 150th anniversary celebration of the Theosophical Society in Vancouver. So I was kind of preparing for that and dealing with some of the ideas that might be useful in the memorial address. There is the international president and our historian will open the session, and then I am thank you, and I am supposed to be closing it. So it's kind of I am the concluder and they are the starter. But in any event, in preparation for that process and for those talks and so forth, I have reconstructed what I have in much more artistic fashion years ago, one time drawn, which is a well, what would you call it? It's a it's a it's a recognition and recollection of mysterious psychic events, which nevertheless, once they are brought into consciousness, can be of use to us. Now, what we need to keep in mind in that respect is that the various processes and considerations which we have been paying attention to regarding the desired development of the human psyche as indicated for us by H.P. Blavatsky lead us up to a certain point. And then the great difficulty, or at least one of the great difficulties, I have considered for a very long time as being precisely the absence or partial absence of the continuation of that process. So let us say, one of the advantages and disadvantages of old age is to remember all kinds of weird stuff from the past. And so one of the ones that I remembered for a long time originated here in Besant Lodge when on Tuesdays we had the Theosophical Society members meeting and were discussing various ways of presenting the theosophical ideas and teachings. And we had a very nice gentleman here whom I had some contact for years. His name was Will Ross, and he was an Englishman who was a nautical engineer, and he was working on some of the ships that were being repaired at that time in Long Beach Harbor. I think later they moved that elsewhere. A very interesting man. And so I remember discussing some matters with him, primarily when nobody else was listening, was to the effect as to what may be missing from the existing theosophical corpus. And of course, I said to him that something is missing because I felt it missing all along. But I don't know what it is that is missing, so what do you think? So as we talked on, he said in brief that what he was really interested in was that there should be a development in literary and other form of what might be called, and he named it, that's his nomenclature, he named it theosophical mysticism. He said that we had a very elaborate and informative and maybe other good statements, cosmological system, but we did not have any mystical system, and that this was needed. So I filed that away in the back part of my Hungarian mind, and then we continued to bump each other, Mr. Ross, and first of all, he really had a difficult time. He married a very nice lady who was working at the Theosophical headquarters in Wheaton. And I thought, oh, well, that's going to be nice, because he was a widower, I think, for ages unnumbered. So what happened? Caroline Tess was her maiden name. Great lady. So Caroline was just walking in the garden of Wheaton, Illinois, and had a massive stroke, and she never left her bed after that. However, she did develop an interest in unusual literature within the theosophical fold, and then she would send me notes. Could you bring me a copy of the Gospel of Philip? She became extremely fond of the Gospel of Philip, number of other Gnostic scriptures. So she became, along with myself, one of these theosophisticated Gnostics, darling thing. And then they brought her back from Wheaton here, and she lived totally bedridden for a number of years after that in Ojai, in Crotona, and then passed away. But Mr. Ross didn't stop. This undoubtedly grieved him greatly, but it didn't stop him, because before I knew it, he was in Australia. And he was in Australia at precisely the same time when I was in Australia, because Joey Mills of Crotona had arranged that I should be the next national lecturer in Australia. So I went to Australia, spent about 4 weeks there, and came back. And Mr. Ross was there at the same time. He was advising me. He said, forget the outback. He says, I know you'll be bored to tears. You go to the cities. He says, this country has the most wonderful cities, Melbourne, Sydney, many others. He says, that's what you are going to like. And I said, well, thank you, Will. And sure enough, that's how it turned out. And so they can have, which is that some place, some kind of a rock, not Eden. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about a cheap wino wine that was being sold in this country. It was called Eden Rock. if you remember it, if you are of such low tastes as having drunk some of it, which I was. But so this was not Eden rock, but all these. I think he advised me well, because this way, first of all, those were the places where I was lecturing, and secondly, it's the sort of thing that I like. And that was very much to my benefit. In any event, but it always stuck in my mind that maybe we can discover something that Mr. Ross called theosophical mysticism. So as time went on, took a long time, because I joined the Theosophical Society right upon the days that I arrived in the United States, so that would have been clear back about let's see, when did I get here? So,
52.
80, yeah.
52.
52, right. So right around that time. So you can see how my geriatric memory goes around, but not on everything. So in any event, let's say then also somewhat with the assistance of Mr. Manly Hall, with whom I became acquainted by that time, and who, of course, Mr. Hall was in every respect except name only a theosophist. He gave H.P. Blavatsky the greatest what would be compliment that anyone else did, when he said that were it not for H.P., he wrote that, were it not for H.P. Blavatsky, he said that all of modern occultism would be, and I quoted this many times before, how does it end?
Would fall like a house of cards.
Would fall like a house of cards. Here's my Mr. Memory, see?
Don't count on me much, I'm right behind you.
Yeah, but this one you got real good. And of course, he has a wonderful big essay in one of his sort of coffee table books on H.P. Blavatsky, with very good picture of hers and so forth, and that is where he put that particular quotation in. And in my various conversations with him, which I managed to snatch when nobody else was attacking Mr. Hall in his office, he felt that obviously, in certain respects, the Theosophical Society did not live up to the expectations of H.P. Blavatsky, and that the various teachings and so forth have gone somewhat awry, but not in the sense that he criticized the teaching mission of the TS, except saying that perhaps they should have gone in a different direction. And once I put some study to that, I became more and more in favor of that idea. So let's say instigated by Mr. Ross, but certainly subsequently supported by various previously unknown writings of H.P. Blavatsky, the two chief ones having been discovered by our theosophical historian, Mr. Gomes in New York, who found two volumes, a smaller one and a bigger one, And as it so often happens, the smaller one is maybe a little more concentrated, and if one puts one's mind to it, maybe more capable of revealing what the content is. One is the secret doctrine. What? Mm-hmm. Anyway, there's something like the Secret Doctrine Digest, although it is not. And what it was that when Madame Blavatsky, disappointed, came from India back to London, she gathered a group of people who she felt would be able to handle the rather difficult material, and then they had a class. This was at the house that Annie Besant owned the house already. Annie Besant turned that house over to H.P. Blavatsky, and so that's where a couple of times a week they had these meetings. And then the second book, which was written later, right before her death, which is the one that we've been using at the book club here, and which is, let's see, what's the title of that one?
Esoteric Instructions.
Esoteric Instructions, yeah. Because by then she was trying to work out an arrangement which would allow her to teach what she considered to be the previously not publicized and therefore somewhat secret teachings, which she felt would complete what she had done with the Secret Doctrine and others. But then, of course, while engaged in that particular teaching mission, she died. So that was the end of that for a long time, for almost 100 years, until Mr. Michael Gomes of New York City went to Adyar, and being a very charming gentleman, I hope to God, I mean, he will be in Canada, but I hope to God that I can persuade him and the international president to make an arrangement so that Mr. Michael Gomes could come out here for a week or two, because I tell you that is an unusual man, and what he knows about theosophical material is vast. So I think he would be of very great interest to people here, and not only to committed members of the society, but even otherwise. So let's say, aside from that, anyway, these previously secret or hidden away papers that became those two volumes, I think, even though not terribly widely publicized, have created a great deal of previously unexpected interest. And to briefly characterize that interest, that there is more. In other words, the Secret Doctrine and the Theosophical Glossary and things of that sort, all the writings that H.P. Blavatsky wrote and finished, especially toward the end of her life, and were the beginning of her reaching out toward an other and perhaps deeper and in some ways more complex approach to her theosophical teachings. Now I can testify to that having come to this lodge and joined the society at the age of, 22, I was pretty deeply interested in these matters, and that my judgments and perhaps criticisms of that time had a considerable amount of validity. You know, young people are more critical than older people, because by the time you get you don't have to get my age, just even if older. You know, it's just well, yeah. So things really don't matter all that much. But some things were found that really matter. And based on these, and in this connection, we have, some of us have studied these matters further, and we came to the conclusion that to finish HPB's work, there must be a step into previously untrodden territory. And that when we read, as fascinating as it is, and when we read things like the secret doctrine, when we theorize about them, or even the key to theosophy and some of those, it's not quite enough. So there is something else. When you stop with the secret doctrine, when you stop with much of the published literature of HPB, hello there, and others, you are still only working with a part of her material, and that it is necessary to take a turn and to begin, let's say, on a road which leads beyond all those statements and discoveries and teachings that have been put forth up to that time. So what I'm telling you is a terrible heresy, but I will repeat it in a kindly fashion to that great crowd in Canada also, namely that something is missing. You say, well, no, you got reincarnation and karma and masters and so forth. Yeah, that's exactly that. There it is where it is missing. So what is missing? What is missing is the manner, and I'm just really making this very short, the manner in which you can personally, individually verify and perhaps elaborate upon HPB's teachings. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the secret doctrine you have a wonderful mythological statement, a huge statement after all, look at all those volumes, of how we got here. Now, my interest usually has been much more as to how to get out of here. But on the other hand, if you know how you got somewhere and draw good conclusions, then you may find out how to get out of here. Because of course my desire, but I'm not really insisting on that, but my desire really was that once I'm out of here, I ain't coming back. So let's say the great interest in reincarnation had never touched me. I said, well, look, if incarnations are of the kind that I had just experienced getting here, then you know what? I don't want any more of it. And I still don't. But on the other hand, I also know that things happen in life that you may not want all that much. I would say quite a few things happened to me in my life that I didn't want and still don't want. So it could all kinds of things. But if you look at HPB's less publicized writings, you find actual statements there saying that, well, yes, some people reincarnate, other people don't reincarnate. Some people go to other planets and so forth. There are all kinds of things that happen after death, not just a reincarnation on Earth. And I said, hello there, HPB. In any event, let's say, as time went on, and also when combining the Blavatskyan material with teachings of other great occultists from the Middle Ages and otherwise, we come up with at least a partial plan, which I have somewhat tried to sketch in my badly organized little paper here, of what HPB indicated without coming up, without saying it in so many words, but indicated of what happens to the spirit of the human after death. And I think that's important, and I think on this plan, with various additions and elaborations, could be based a consideration of what may we expect when we put the body aside. Now, here we are. I have drawn this very primitively, and what we really have here are two geometrical figures. One being should really be a square, but it isn't. It's more like the shape of a brick, which I called personality, and another one, to which I added letters HGA, because that is the magical word for the same, holy guardian angel, and which I also called spirit, which is in a triangular form in these diagrams, and that sort of floats above with a tenuous connection with the personality. The personality has four corners: earth, water, fire, and air. And if you want to Jungianize it, then it has the four psychological functions, which in turn give rise to the four psychological types. But those could be sort of envisioned as the corners of that falsely square structure of the fire, the air, the water, and let's see what else. Earth, of course, the one that I like least. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in any event, what we have, I'm not from. If you had reached the age 93 and went through the majority of the experiences that I have, you wouldn't have no great big desire to come back in any shape or form, whether as a baby coyote in the Hollywood Hills or anything else. But let's say So what we have here is that we are a dual creature, and that can be deduced from a lot of the theosophical books. So it's certainly not contrary to existing theosophical teaching. So, and these are really the building blocks of the personality. So HPB gave new names to a lot of these things. And so the lower self, the personality, she gave the personality four corners, so to say, which really could correspond to the earth, water, fire, and air, and which are physical, astral, physical, etheric, astral, lower mental. Those are the names he gave it, and that's understandable. I certainly don't blame her for adding these names to it, because this way she was able to distance herself from older occult systems, Rosicrucian systems, alchemical systems, and so forth, but with the indication that there is more. That this is the personality, this is the lower self, but there's something else. And that something else is a mysterious spiritual construct that maybe envision a sort of hovering over the personality. And from it derives a kind of energy that could probably not be easily gotten in any other way. So this is really the link of the human personality to what HPB referred to as the self. So there is a personality and a self. The personality is, as you might expect, personal. What else could it be? But the self, in German, the Selbst, is a higher being. And it is really the spiritual being which feeds the personality with motivation for activity, for doing various things here on earth, and in perhaps gaining enough experience in order to reach the higher self. Now, I have chosen to pick the term that has been used by a lot of occultists and magicians, which is a medieval term for what the theosophy calls the higher self. And the most frequently used word for that is the holy guardian angel. It's definitely used in all the magical tradition. Now, why? Sounds very Christian, sounds like we're little children walking in the various icons, walking over a bridge or something like that, and there is this nice little angel holding them up so that they are not going to fall into the water and this sort of thing. But you've got to remember that the times are not so far gone wherein to refer to a higher self or a higher spirit would maybe end you in the jail of the Inquisition. What do you mean? So they added it a Christian pseudonym, the HGA, the Holy Guardian Angel, which is of course a Christian, it's a teaching but not a terribly important one. You can easily take Roman Catholic baptism or so without affirming the existence of the holy guardian angel, but the idea being that people have a spiritual self, a higher self, and that it is for the purpose of guarding their spiritual welfare whenever possible. So that is what we are talking about here. So it was the recognition of a spiritual being which at one time, when the personality hasn't had much experience, isn't very well developed, you might wonder, well, what is that? But let's say there is a spiritual being, a transcendental being, not entirely different from yourself, but on the other hand also much more than yourself. A being that is full of wisdom, full of caring, full of compassion, sort of like a little mini Buddha that is there and that you should pay attention to. And that is what in my crummy diagrams here I characterized with a triangle and put next to it HGA, which is the magical occult Western name for the holy guardian angel. So here we are on the ordinary circumstances, those of us with not too much transcendental experiences or so forth, but certain aspirations, and we have the human personality, and we have sort of connected with it mysteriously and inspiring it and warning it at times of danger and things of that sort, which at times has been referred to in theosophical literature as the higher self. The higher self. So the human personality is the lower self, and then there is a higher self. And this higher self is sort of guiding and inspiring and almost goading the human personality to come closer to itself, to reach the higher self, that there is more than the human personality in which you live. And that when you are able to cultivate that and get there, then the chances are that a new approach to consciousness will come to you. In other words, you are not finished the way you are right now. This is what I often quote the philosopher, English exiled philosopher Gerald Heard, who has spoken here a number of times. He was a terrific guy, a great friend of Aldous Huxley. He was sort of Aldous Huxley's inspiration and close friend. So he said that the human is the only unfinished animal. This was his statement. So whether we consider ourselves animals or not, sometimes we certainly act like them, and maybe it would be better if we acted more often like some animals. In any event, there is something of the connection. We're not really aware of it, most of us, but there is a thin golden thread that connects us with something higher than what we inhabit right now. Now then, that being the case, often, if we are wise enough and instructed enough, what we will do then is reach out in various ways which may be available to us, to that holy guardian angel. We can do it in prayer, we can do it in ritual, we can do it in yoga, and it's one of these questions, oh, but that's not me. Oh, yes, that is very much you. That is much more you than what you think is you right now. And by accomplishing a closer contact with it, you will profit spiritually. And this is the mystery of the Holy Guardian Angel. So now, under ordinary circumstances, and this is, of course, all metaphorical, you may envision this as this square. You know, the term square is, for instance, very frequently used in Freemasonry and even in Elvis's rock and roll, where there is Elvis did one that I always liked, which was called the jailhouse rock. You know, jailhouse rock, and the warden says, "Be no square." If you have no partner, grab a wooden chair. A jailhouse rock. You know, I like weird things like this. Fortunately, I have escaped being in any jailhouse, although if I had stayed longer in my native land, I think it would have had a more ordinary meaning. But in any event, you know, there we are. There is the HGH, the Holy Guardian Angel, which usually is diagrammatically represented as a triangle, hovering over the square, which is the personality. And so whenever we have really good insights, when we have really good impulses, when we're really listening to the Dalai Lama and want to employ some compassion in our daily affairs and so forth, then we are in touch with the HGA. Now, how did they come up with this curious notion? Well, for one thing, I don't have all my sources here, but if you take, for instance, the book Modern Occultism, which has recently been published, a very good one of the very early chapters which deals with Hermeticism will indicate there is a particular there were several Hermetic scriptures, but one of which I always forget the name, but it is the name of an author, the author who wrote it. But I think really to visualize the scene is much more important than the names, which we can easily find in various books. But what this amounts to is that this particular Alexandrian Hermetic Greek gentleman, he was really working on his spiritual development. He was praying, doing various rituals, and so he was guided to go to a particular shrine or something of that sort, and he went there. And as he was walking in, he saw, first in a kind of a shadowy way, I believe, and then fully formed, a big, impressive figure that was walking with him. And so he keeps walking in, and then he turns around, or in some way the two figures are confronted, and he sees that this big, impressive figure, apparently much more impressive than he envisioned himself to be, has his face. So it was he, but in a different, much more impressive form. Excuse me. They told me I would get old, but they didn't tell me I would be coughing. But don't worry, I don't have tuberculosis. Or whatever this thing is that was invented by Dr. Fauci a while ago, I don't have that either. Anyway, the upshot of that scene of this Alexandrian hermeticist going into the shrine and then discovering that this gigantic figure that was accompanying him is himself. It has his face and everything else. So that then this is used as the way to illustrate that there is another self. And that is the higher self. That is the self that has gnosis. And our gnosis, or whatever else we wish to call it, our insights, our transcendental function, as Jung would call it, are all derived from this other self. Now, this doesn't mean that we should cultivate a kind of schizophrenia or other kind of double personality, but that we should reach out to this other self. And that's what we are really doing when we are seeking inspiration, when we are seeking insight. I rather well remember, which was probably one of my major creative accomplishments in this curious life, that when I sat down, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do, but I sat down to write what became the Jung and the 7 Sermons to the Dead. So there I was, it just kept pouring into me, to the great discomfort of my neighbors, especially one who is next to my apartment, because I was up all night typing on my old Royal manual typewriter. So, in any event, let's say, I noticed then that, and then you ask yourself, well, where is this stuff coming into my head? How is this happening? How can I have these impulses of wisdom just pour down like the Dickens, and then you look at it and say, did I really write that? And I'm certainly not the only author who has had that experience. Often there are some, I don't know whether it was one of the great German poets, Schiller or Goethe or so wrote it, that he was worn out writing most of the night, went to bed, woke up in the morning, went to the table and looked at what he had written. He said, did I write that? Did I write that? But of course in those days you had no royal typewriter, whether it was manual or otherwise, but you discovered that you were inspired. Now of course the spiritualist is, I have a guiding spirit. How would it be to consider that a guiding spirit is really you, the true you, the greater you, the wiser you, and not somebody else. And of course, this is, there are all kinds of details to this kind of situation, but that is essentially what HPB did. Now, where you find the personal descriptions of how she was contacted by her higher self, not the master, that came later. You see? But you can call your higher self master, I don't care. I don't think anybody else cares. But the thing is that something was happening. Something was coming through. And the way she came to discover as to what was happening to her, and you'll find in the articles in 2 issues that I mentioned of Quest magazine this month. There one issue, and then there is another issue, another. Anyway, there are in Quest magazine of this past month, where she had discovered the symbolism of alchemy. Now, the way it comes out, because she wrote certain letters. One letters to, believe it or not, whoever has accomplished that, Dr. Blavatsky, one letter to her great-grandfather, Prince Dolgoruki, which is a very illustrious family. If it were not for the Dolgorukis, there wouldn't be any Ukraine, because they are the ones who founded Little Rus, which is the Russian province that is the farthest away from the Ural Mountains and so forth. And her great-grandfather was still there. Incidentally, they are also the descendants of the Orthodox Saint Vladimir of Kiev, who is the founder of Little Rus, and who is the beginning of the Dolgoruki family. It's a very, very illustrious family. But her great-grandfather was still around, and apparently great-grandfather had at times, maybe not forever, but had at times been responsible for the education of little Helena, his great-granddaughter. And so HPB was sort of felt close to him. And that so she is writing to him how she had really studied and worked on internalizing the message of all the alchemical books that great-grandfather had in his library, to which she had access, and thanking him for it and so forth. So let us say you can, and then she, as she goes on, she says that, but of course here one has to be a little bit familiar with alchemical terminology, but I'll make it very quick. The alchemy is also based on the idea that we start out with the 4. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. It's 4 colors and so forth. And then we find that a change will occur as we are immersed in this 4-fold mystery of where we are locked up in the human personality. And eventually what happens is that the alchemical constellation, which starts with the 4, begins to undergo a change. And you've got to keep that in mind, because these changes are likely to happen to you, I think some of them happened already. And the most important one is that the structure that you are involved in, which is really the structure of your psyche, begins to change. And as it changes, so of course you have to change. And what happens is that, it's not that right away the holy guardian angel is going to come and grab you by the hair and take you up to heaven, no. But it will begin, for one thing, depending on the system of alchemy that you're studying. But usually what happens is that there is a big disorganization taking place. And so don't feel too discombobulated when you feel disorganized in your psyche. And all the different alchemical colors, the red and so the water, fire, air, and earth, the black, that is just the black earth, the red fire, the ethereal air, and the blue water, get jumbled together. So that part of our spiritual development is that we get more confused than we have been. And it is referred to in Latin as the massa confusa, the confused mass. And this is the confused mass of our personality. And eventually it changes into one. There is a time when it all becomes red like fire, another time when it becomes brown like earth, blue like water, and so forth. And eventually, out of this develops a new situation. And eventually, at least a particular alchemical system that young HPB was studying, what you have is a situation where the internal structure, the alchemical structure, becomes more and more dual. And they shift out, and one part is white, and the albedo, the other part is black, the nigredo. And so, and now these two go on struggling with each other, talking with each other, shaking hands with each other, doing all kinds of strange things. And if you ever get hold of a book by C.G. Jung, which is called The Psychology of the Transference, doesn't sound very much like alchemy, does it? But it is. It will show you in it there are the pictures, the 10 pictures of what is called the Rosary of the Philosophers, Rosarium Philosophorum. And there you have the dark bead and the light bead, which are like a rosary. And these are interacting with each other in all kinds of ways. In the end, their interactions are over, they unite. And they become the alchemical double-headed eagle, which is really the last great, which is known in the royal family whose colors I am wearing, the Habsburg family of Austria-Hungary, the alchemical opposites, which can be gold and black, they can be something else. But in any event, out of this finally arises a strange unified being. And that unified being is the the alchemical androgyne, as it's often called, because both the positive and the negative forces, the black and the white, are eventually united in it. Up to that time, they are fighting with each other. So how all this may, because the gender issue is present there, but in a very spiritual way. So the people with their gender changes nowadays, whether they are involved in this alchemy or not, you go on up there and ask somebody else. But in any event, as the transformation process takes place, as I say, there are 10 or 11 beads on the rosary. They are in the rosary of the philosophers, and so the individual develops this within himself. And so she writes, HPB writes to her great-grandfather and says, "Great-grandfather, I am now moving into the white side from the black side. What do you say about that?" In other words, transformational stages, and when there is only the black and the white, then it's the two of them struggling with each other, seeing what's going to happen. So what happens is that instead of one winning out, they fuse, they become the alchemical androgyne, which is often represented as the double eagle, the two-headed eagle, which on the Austrian eagle it's black, in the Byzantine eagle it's white, but it's all the same. It is the dualities. First, let's put it this way: first, life, the life of the psyche, must be reduced to its components. And the components eventually reveal themselves as dual. Sometimes masculine and feminine, sometimes various other things. But in any event, there they are. And then, as they are struggling with each other, the two, the black and the white, as she calls it, now come together, and at the end they unite and they are now one. And this is that one. Another name for it is the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is composed of the union of the two opposites within ourselves. So we can look at that in other ways, and it's not just the masculine and the feminine, but it can be all kinds of seemingly oppositional forces that are struggling with each other and eventually become a unified whole. And we see that represented as the last great picture in the Rosary of the Philosophers, which is reproduced. All the pictures of the Rosary of the Philosophers are in Jung's book that I just mentioned, which is, what is it? It is the psychology of the transference, one picture after the other. And we have actually, years ago, copied a lot of these. So we had, and we have now, we have the ability, for instance, to project these transformational stages on a motion picture. They are very, very interesting. So I'll have to dig up my copies, and I also had the book, which I think somebody made off with. But in any event, that is one of the more direct and representations of what happens. So there is HPB saying, well, she says, the black is now almost gone and everything is white. So she moved into, and the reunion is taking place under the white auspices. Now, mind you, this is years that she had that experience and wrote that letter. That is years before she went with her father, the colonel at that time. He died as a general, incidentally. Madame Blavatsky's father was a general of the Tsar. So, very, very, very high rolling things. But in any event, where she supposedly saw the Master Kuthumi or somebody in the parade that was being staged for Queen Victoria. This was Queen Victoria's big anniversary. So something was happening in the young girl, and she said, now it's all changing into the white, now I can live with the white. So she experiences the alchemical union, and she describes it, if you read it in those letters, and one letter. That's very, very interesting and very important, because it means that the whole theosophical development of Helena Petrovna, who was not a Blavatsky at that time yet, because that only came by way of a mistaken marriage, which she herself described as a mistaken marriage, even though the old official Mr. Blavatsky was very kind to her to the end. She left him and traveled all over the world, but when he figured out where she was, he would send her money from Russia, and so he was a good old guy. In any event, that is really not of ultimate importance, but the importance is that she underwent and wrote it down, testified to it. She underwent an alchemical transformation that I be done, if you can explain in any other way, but as being an alchemical transformation. It was not a yoga, it was not a Christian mysticism, it was not any of these things, it was alchemy. You see? And there was no master involved either, at least that she spoke of. So she underwent a powerful interior transformation which ultimately results in the union of the opposites. Now if you have some individual insight, you can just think of it. What major opposites am I dealing with? How could they unite? Now maybe the opposites are the Democrat Party and the Republican Party at the present time. What kind of an alchemy would it take to unite those? Well, I'll stay out of it. I'm not going to be the alchemist in that case, for a variety of reasons. But it's the many resolve into the two, and then the two struggle with each other, and finally they resolve into one. So the other letter, which is written to Prince Dondukov-Korsakov, who was a cousin of hers, and that always excites me when I read that, because my father had all kinds of archival material in the good old days, and he had many journals from the late 19th and early 20th century. And almost on every page there was the picture of Prince Dondukov-Korsakov, the last great statesman of Imperial Russia. And my father said that was the last real good man that they had before the terrible Bolshevik revolution broke out. So anyway, that's just a little bit, but I was familiar with the picture of this bearded gentleman, Prince Alexander, Don Duke of Korsakov, and now this many years I discovered it in HPB's alchemical letters. So that was another very important, and she wrote to him also about her alchemical experiences. So let's say, if you gain the impression from theosophical literature that what this is all about, first of all, the theosophy is reincarnation and karma as shepherded into your head by the masters. Really? HPB herself didn't seem to think so. She herself was under guidance to see performed within herself a transformational task of alchemy. Now, a good many years later, not that much later, because he was born in 1875, really quite toward the end. There was a broad-shouldered countryman in Switzerland by the name of Carl Gustav Jung, who came up with insights of a very, very similar nature. And what did Jung call the accomplishment of his work? If somebody did Jungian analysis with him also, what did he call that? He called it individuation, the becoming one, so that the opposites divide, but then they come together and they are one. And that there are assisting agencies, that may very well be true. I have never denied the existence of the masters, but I had and I have serious, now I can't say this, I'm not going to say this in Canada, but very serious doubts about the kind of masters and the whole mythology of masters that sort of developed, much of it by Leadbeater in his book, The Masters and the Path, and so forth. And I have always said it's very nicely written, but it should not be taken terribly seriously. The important thing is the master inside of us. He's there already. And if we ask him a serious question, he will give us a serious answer. So ultimately, this is of course a psycho-babble, but I don't babble, so it's psycho-talk. Yeah. But it indicates that really what is taking place in a theosophical transformation is just exactly that, transformation. And transformation is not evolution. No. That there can be evolutionary forces in nature, that is true. But whether they are there or not, frankly, I couldn't care less. Because the important thing is not a slow evolutionary process from the atom to the stars, but the development, the transformation, just like on the mulberry tree, where the little what the heck are they? The little worm-like creatures that eat the mulberry, and then the silkworms. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So that's the important part. That we are like a silkworm. And I see some neighbors of mine long ago had silkworms. And so I went there when the silkworms were on the mulberry tree. They only eat mulberry leaves. Don't try to feed them anything else. And just coming close to the tree, munch, crum. The whole tree was just shaking with chewing because the little fellows were changing. Then they spin themselves into a cocoon, and eventually that cocoon is the raw material for silk. And I think the smart Chinese, before they became red, had invented that, because the Chinese were the first great producers of silk. So why did I bring that up? Because of transformation. So we are destined to transform and to become something that for all intents and purposes we are not, but we can become. And that something is a very important thing, that it makes us into very different beings, and it gives us a great more insight, and it actually completes the human development. And again, I don't use the word evolution. That is, we have to transform. And as we transform into what? We transform into a replica of the divine image. So when the holy guardian angel comes down and fuses with the personality, then we have the union with the holy guardian angel. So there are really 3 stages of development that at least I have discerned. First is the ordinary separation under which we live now, and then comes what is called the vision of the holy guardian angel. When we as a personality begin to visualize, we begin to find out that there is this other being, seemingly other being. And then after that, there is a closer relationship. And that is called a conversation with the holy guardian angel. And finally, there is union with the guardian angel. And that is the epitome of human development. So it's very important to remember what we are dealing with here, that originally there is a duality, higher self, lower self. Then there is the lower self envisions, the lower self sees, perceives, recognizes the holy guardian angel. And then comes the union with the holy guardian angel. And that is the conclusion of the alchemical process, when the black and the white, or whatever we wish to call it, join together. So here we are. What we need, therefore, is not a whole bunch of reincarnations, not a bunch of masters sitting in the Himalayas, but what we need is to find our HGA, our Holy Guardian Angel, our higher self, interact with it meaningfully, and ultimately unite with it. Because when we have united with the higher self, what else is there to be done? Well, maybe we'll find out. But that is the diagrammatic approach to what we are here on earth to do, what we can do here on earth, and it's a somewhat shorter and maybe to some people not as satisfactory description of the unification process that we are here to accomplish, and that was first taught, maybe even in somewhat different, under different images to us, by that remarkable Russian alchemist, the daughter of the Cossack officer, the teacher of the 19th and of the 20th century, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. So I hope that that makes an impression. Again, I don't see that the imagery, the alchemical imagery, is the only one, but I think that there is sufficient evidence now indicating that the magical alchemical approach was that caught H.P. Blavatsky at first, and that it in turn developed into the huge mythos of theosophy, because she had to communicate it in a way that wasn't really present here on earth. And so she communicated it in an oblique alchemical fashion. So you got to keep in mind that there's, I think in Hungary we had a saying, as probably one also elsewhere, that there's more than one way to skin a cat, even though I never skinned one and nobody in my family did either. There's more than one way to come to a point. And so the theosophical image, the way it developed now, I think is, if not exactly faulty, but it is inadequate. How can it be made more adequate? By having the same experience, by becoming an alchemist ourselves, by changing the black into white and becoming what Jung said, a unified individual. And so now, if I were called to do that, but I am not at this time, Jung's description of the psyche and of the transformation of the psyche is on other, expressed in an other language. It is theosophy. Not because he stole anything from the theosophists, but because he got it from the same mysterious source that Jung got it. The higher self. Jung spoke, the very first expression that Jung used was unification, becoming one. Not becoming a good boy, not going to the Himalayas and bother the lamas. They are being bothered enough by the Chinese right now, anyway, but rather to become one. Higher self and lower self. And the two, the great and holy wedding, which will never be divorced, and which foreshadows the union of the opposites in the cosmos. Very, very interesting and important idea. So I was trying to convey it, and who knows what manner we may convey it yet, but I hope it has been of some interest to you. And no doubt, it looks different, but only the surface looks different. Why did they publish two of these key alchemical letters to two Russian princes? Why did they publish them? Because that is the essential message of theosophy, the message of the essence, what needs to happen with the essence. And when that is discovered, then there will be more and more of us real theosophers, as somebody called them, rather than just theosophists. And Blavatsky's work will not have been in vain. I never thought it was, but I knew that something was missing. Now I think it has been discovered, not by me, but by the historians who found these long-lost works of HPB. And so I think that we may, but it's always a may, that we may have discovered a way of reviving the late 19th century theosophy in the 21st and the 22nd and the 23rd century. I think we discovered the essence, we discovered the kernel. And if we discover something, then we have to use it. And that's what we should do. And in a polite but forceful manner, I have some aspirations to bring that forth a few days from now in Canada. But I don't think it's going to make me more popular. But I never gave a thinker's damn for that. And I am not starting now. So in any event, this is, maybe I didn't express it correctly, but this is a very important issue. The ultimate work, the magnum opus, which may arise out of a theosophical life, theosophical study, and which with our cooperation, the cooperation of people who have studied the theosophical cosmology, may come into being. And when it comes into being, who knows what it may produce in the world. The results could only be good. If the alchemy begins to take place in enough people, then the world will change for something better. Not otherwise. Not because of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and I don't know, Pol Pot, the murderer, and others, no. But because something that can happen in us, in each and every one of us. It can happen, it must happen, and it will happen. So thank you very much.